Ruin Comics.
Okay.
All right, 30 seconds. Your 30 seconds are up. No more boomer music.
Wait a second. Why do I keep doing that wrong? What's wrong with me? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it's Wednesday. It's another Mattriarchy. And I got to say one thing quick. And I don't mean this is disrespect to either of you guys. Of course, interrupting myself. We've got Hutch and we've got Cartoonicus. Guys, thanks for coming. But I was listening to the intro thinking, man, Matt and Twitless have not been here in a while. That makes me a little sad.
Poor Twitless. Trying desperately to get that degree finished up.
Hopefully. I every once in a while he'll shoot me a message into DMs and or whatever, and letting me know that he is just working on his paper. He hasn't decided he hates me. So I appreciate that. Now, if he hadn't decided, I couldn't blame him. I know who I am, but I also hope the best for him with the school thing. Speaking of which, before we started on the thing, I wanted to do a little show and tell. I recently got some stuff, and I want to talk about it. So, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to give myself the big screen. Oh,
go ahead.
Hey, is there a way to? Ooh, look at this.
I feel like I just discovered that the Earth is flat.
It's not. It's an oblique spheroid. So it's close to flat at the very top and the very bottom, but still not.
That's what they meant all this time. We misunderstood them.
Yeah, it's because the spinning stretches it in the middle, like a pizza, but not like a pizza. Also, I realized. See, I went off to get my coffee when people were coming in the back room, and I put this little notice to everybody that I'll be back right there. But I've already returned. Okay. So first of all, you guys.
No.
What?
I was just sharing my shirt.
That's Sheepadoodle.
Dad, that's Sheepadoodle Dad ever.
What is a Sheepadoodle? Hutch?
Sheepdog and poodle.
Oh.
That's my other dog. So
I see.
Yeah. Sorry. I just thought you're seeing the top letters. I should show everybody because they're going to be asking what
I've
it
never
is.
heard it called a sheepdog. And
Sorry. I did not mean to interrupt you.
No. You're perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. So, you guys all know, and Abigail in the chat has recently mentioned that she picked up on other social media stuff. She picked up Scott Pilgrim. So I thought it was an appropriate time to bring up this that I just picked up at Walmart.
Hey.
Right. So why is this connected to Scott Pilgrim? Because this is done. This is A Wrinkle in Time, adapted by Hope Larson, who was married to Brian O'Malley when he made Scott Pilgrim, and
so
for reasons that are none of my business.
There.
What?
I said 7 degrees of separation there.
No, just one. But for reasons that are none of my business, they're no longer married. But I was curious about this. I tried reading the book through the audiobook, and it didn't work for me. The audiobook didn't. I couldn't get into it, and for various reasons. But I decided to go ahead and pick this up for its own sake, and because I wanted to see what Hope Larson was up to. I knew she made comics, but I've never read or been seen any of them. So that was one. Another thing I recently picked up for an absolute song. Hello, Flying Saucer. Flying Saucer is looking for a Sheepadoodle.
Wait, is that?
Yeah. I almost bought another Border Collie, but it didn't work out. Anyway, this is the Masters of American Comics. It's a big retrospective and art book of American comics from the 1880s up through the 90s. Done in 2005, I think. So I got this for an absolute song from a library sale. It was like, I think like $4 for this big old hard book.
There's
So I had-
something
I couldn't-
familiar about this. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if I got it from a library when I was doing a report on comics in school.
One of the big reasons I was specifically interested is it has a whole section on Popeye, and I've been going through the Popeye thing lately. So I was really interested to read that on it. And also, I have been wanting to do more reading into comics, American comics, specifically historical or academic reading that has been ignored by modern comic studies.
Okay,
also
hold the
is why-
phone. Sorry to interrupt here, but if you're going through a big Popeye section, right? If this is the book I'm thinking of, that was one of the things that gave me such an insight to the difference between the Popeye comics and the cartoons. Okay, I need you to tell me if and when you get to that strip I told you guys about that I couldn't find, with him making a deal with Wimpy over whether or not he could resist the hamburger.
I will see if that one's in there.
Please do.
Is it a biased book? Well, all books are biased. That's the nature of all things. There's no such thing as fair and balanced. That's a lie. That being said, I have not read it, but it does go into it's a retrospective, so it talks about comics throughout the 140 years that it goes over. So it talks about our Crumb, but it also talks about RF Cult and talks Out Cult, and talks about Cigar and I'm forgetting his name right now, the Ignatz and Crazy Cat dude. It'll pop into my head later. And of course, what? The Little Nemo in Dreamland has a big section in there.
Right.
You
So
do
when
see me, right?
Yeah, I see you and the dog. I just wasn't
Okay,
commenting
yeah.
on it.
This is Bonnie. This is a sheepadoodle.
Ah, I see.
So, yeah. So we have her trimmed up like a poodle mostly, but if we were to let it grow over her eyes, she would look very much like a sheepdog. So,
Was like an English sheepdog and a poodle.
yeah. English sheepdog and a poodle.
Okay.
And a mini poodle, actually. There you
I
go.
feel like it's about
Okay.
to yell Edward.
What?
Edward? What?
Chat, you can tell us if anybody gets that joke.
Okay. So the other thing
Thank
I
you.
want to pick up, and this is something I don't think I've shown on stream before, but I got it a couple years ago. Well, again, another from a library sale. This is Comics as Culture. This is a book from 1995, I think it was. Or was it 92? Let me look here. 1990. There we go. And is actually done by University of Mississippi Press. So this is a full-on academic book about comics that
Cool.
predates Scott McCloud. So Scott McCloud became a valuable but a huge voice in the sign of in the area of comic studies for especially for beginners.
Mhm.
And a lot of people act like nothing academically was done with comics before Scott McCloud, but that's nonsense.
No.
And so one of my long-term back burner things is to collect some of these academic resources that predate McCloud. Not to take away from him in terms of producing. One of the things Twitless has pointed to me is that making
Like comics and
understanding comics,
sequential art.
right? Comic sequential art's on my list too.
Yeah.
But one of the things that McCloud's work does is that it is a comic,
Right.
and that's a
I was gonna
unique
say it.
presentation.
He made it easy to understand. But
Right. He's a very much of a popularizer. And which is really interesting to me that pop culture needs a popularizer. So Flying Saucer says that you've got a good pup. The big dork in front of him is a service dog.
Well, I just pushed the door shut and they pushed it back open. I was trying to not bother my wife in the other room. As soon as I pushed the door shut, they went, bam, get it open again. So they're here again. Anyway, as long as we're talking about recent purchases, before we get into our main topic,
Let's do.
I'm not a big student of Lovecraft. I've probably only read 3 or 4 stories, but they're good ones. And I think I really love At the Mountains of Madness, even though in many ways it lacks a story. It has a story, but it's not it's kind of like we wandered here and then we wandered there and then we wandered there and then we left. It's like,
Right.
yeah, it could use a little something in the third act, but it's good. It was on its way to being adapted by what's his name, Guillermo del Toro.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, he had like the artwork done. He had like mock-ups of the big blind penguins, the big monster penguins and everything. There, you can find this artwork online. It was like very close and it fell through. And I really wish it would happen, but I've wanted to see like how people interpret it. And I found this is like Dark Horse Comics made this. H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. It's like a two-part manga.
Here, hang on. I just realized I need to do something different. We need to give you the
Hey, there we go. So this is a 2-part manga. I'm not going to try to show you all the artwork or anything, but it's an interesting approach. Even stuff like they say that they have planes at the South Pole, and the way that that's interpreted is very different from this book that I got, which is just a thin book, but also does a very good job of capturing the story. This one is At the Mountains of Madness. This is by selfmadehero.com.
Oh.
And it's let's see, Lovecraft and adapted by Culberd. And I think he must do the art and the adaptation and everything. And it's a full color adaptation. I was not expecting that. So it's very nice for $20. And if anybody knows of any other comic adaptations of At the Mountains of Madness, I'll get it, because I've been kind of I kind of like seeing how people interpret Lovecraft, because they're so very different from another. Even if you look online, what At the Mountains of Madness, the reason it can't be adapted for the most part is that if you tried doing it, people would go, well, that's the thing. They're like, no, it's granted, it's about an Arctic expedition and they find aliens, but it's not the thing. But there's enough people who'd be going, well, this is just a ripoff of the thing, that they wouldn't go see it. And they find these aliens and they describe them over the radio to the other person who does a drawing of them. And that basically allows you, the reader, to kind of picture what they look like. And yet, if you go online and look for these things, everybody interprets them very differently from each other. So that's why I'm interested in, seeing different interpretations of the same text. And I have a lot of classic adaptations and things like that. That's kind of what I'm into right now. So, okay. I don't know how that connects up with what you're doing. I just wanted to talk about my recent purchase, as long as you were doing that with yours.
No, I think that's perfectly fair. Perfectly
okay.
legit. So
you can have the big board.
I recently purchased a box of Pepperidge Farm.
Oh, let's see it.
Hey,
I already ate
I remember.
I remember. Okay.
So says Lovecraft are not easy reads, but I love them. The Jeffrey Combs movies are fun also.
Yeah. So, the Jeffrey Combs movies are very good examples of how to successfully adapt something that may not have been a great. The source might be a very thin adaptation that doesn't lend itself. I've also seen the. I shouldn't have started talking. This is the one they adapted in the. I can't remember the name of it. Never mind.
Well, the thing with Lovecraft is that, a long time ago, we got the comics. And ever since then, pretty much anything anybody makes out of Lovecraft is actually being made out of those comics as opposed to the original books. Right.
I don't know that I'm familiar with those.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm familiar with the comics you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. It was like in the, 50s, 60s? That's kind of how the Lovecraft universe, as we know it, actually came to be. He wasn't creating a whole, congruent universe in his stories.
I am convinced that is not true.
I said as far as I know, but
yeah, okay. And the reason I think that you're wrong, and I'm not trying to pick on you.
Well, like for instance, the idea of Cthulhu actually being an alien, I'm pretty sure that comes from the comics.
Oh yeah. I'm sure that's a fact. But
it seems anytime we do anything with Lovecraft, they're taking from that version of
it. Yeah. No, I agree with that Cthulhu being an alien is definitely not part of it. But Robert Howard.
It is. It is in the Mountains of Madness because Earth is invaded by Cthulhu aliens. So yeah. Anyway,
but
and
anyway,
the Dunwich Horror was the title I was trying to come up with.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I've seen 2 interpretations of it, and I've read the original, and they're vastly different. So that's like what I'm talking about, that I just like seeing different adaptations. And that leads to what we're talking about today is somebody's interesting spin on Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say before we get into that, because
okay. Sorry.
I
thought I'd lead right into yours.
No, it's fine.
Giving you a good segue there.
Robert Howard and Lovecraft were bros, and they intentionally wrote crossovers between Hyboria and the stuff happening in Earth's ancient past, according to Howard, and the Cthulhu stuff. I mean, not the Cthulhu specifically, but some of his other old god stuff. So they definitely intended some sort of universe, or you can't have the elements that cross over.
Yeah.
So
and Chuck Dixon has carried that on with his 3 Conan novels. Each one has a Lovecraftian monster in it. So yeah.
He Flying Saucer picks it up right there, right thing with Howard. Yep. And actually, here's what Metal's comment is that comes a lot from the pulps. Just that Lovecraft's friends did more to build his universe than he did.
And like I say, I'm not a big student of him or anything like that. I've read a few stories and I like him. That's all. So
that's not.
But I didn't mean to distract. I didn't mean to get us totally derailed. It's fine.
Yeah. That's the show. That's distraction. What we do.
That's what we do.
So that's not to say, of course, Cartoonicus, that it's not that your other statement about like the visual interpretations of Cthulhu having a root in some sort of 50s comics. I have no idea about that. I'm not arguing with you on that at all. Just the universe building portion. I have myself not read a lot of Lovecraft stuff. In fact, the thing I am most familiar with directly from him is the adaptation of is it The Color Purple? Not The Color Purple. What's it called? The Color from Space or something? There's a Nick.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
There's a Nick Cage adaptation of the short story.
Yeah. If Lovecraft had found out that there are frequencies of light that we can't see, he would have absolutely freaked out.
Yep. Is it the Color from Space? That sounds so stupid.
I don't think it's named after the colors. He keeps constantly bringing it up. It's like, with colors that no one has ever seen before.
Color Out of Space is the film.
It is. Oh, the film. I don't think that's the name of the. Let me look this up. I'm very curious now.
Yeah, it was based on the Lovecraft short story of the same name, The Color Out of Space.
Really? Huh.
Yeah. Nick Cage and Tommy Chong. I don't remember Tommy Chong being in that, but that's amazing.
To be fair, anything that with Nicolas Cage in it, he kind of forget every other part but him.
Yeah. So
whether that's good or bad.
Metal's got my back. The perception of colors. Yeah. Anyhow, now we're not here to talk about. We're not actually. Here's a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing. We are here to talk about Batman, but of course, one of the most famous elements about Batman is Arkham Asylum, and Arkham was named after a place in a Lovecraft story.
There you go.
So now we're full circle.
Oh, this is going to be an interesting night.
Oh man. Well, the Metal can't make it tonight, I don't think, if I'm reading his chats right, which is a bummer, but that's okay. And if I'd been thinking about this ahead of time enough, I'd have seen about dragging in like somebody like Matt Krotz, who did not grow up reading Batman, to get his take on it. But
well, hey, I didn't grow up reading Batman.
Well, okay, there you go. But you grew up with a cartoon, though, so you're aware of the particular version of Batman that was already influenced by Batman Year One.
A little bit, honestly. As much as I hate to say it, my earliest and biggest influence of Batman was the Adam West TV show.
Yep. Same, absolutely. Which is one of the funniest things that actually let me pull this out here. I'm going to read this section. I brought my little copy that I bought back in my single days. One of my first purchases in my single days.
I was trying to find mine and I couldn't find it, but I remember so much of it. I memorized it,
Did you get the floppies or did you get the trade?
Oh, I got the floppies when they came out. I've got the trade, yeah, but I bought Dark Knight Returns back when it was called the Dark Knight. It was not called that when the singles came out. That's what they called it when they collected it. So
let me first read this thing from the introduction. Actually,
yeah,
it's really funny because Miller writes this absolutely purple opening to it. But that's not what I wanted to. That's not the part I wanted to read of it. It said, if your memory of Batman is that of Adam West and Burt Ward exchanging camped out quips while clobbering slumming guest stars Vincent Price and Cesar Romero, I hope this book will come as a surprise. I am not sure if it did. Even looking back, I felt like when I read this, because I grew up with Adam West and Superfans on TV and all that kind of stuff, and my first exposure to Batman in the comics was the World's Finest. It was the third issue of the World's Finest miniseries that come on. Dave Gibbons did.
Yeah.
Right?
Sorry, if I'd known which artist you were going for, I could have answered.
Yeah. Dave Gibbons didn't actually do the art for it. He did the writing for it. But it's remarkable. I mean, it's great. Yeah. That miniseries is so good. And that was my first thing. Anyway.
Well, as somebody who grew up having read, I mean, I started reading Batman comics early 80s, but I wasn't collecting them. Right. I bought them here and there. I knew Jason Todd before he was the Brat Jason Todd.
Right.
And I was there. I was 16 when John Byrne restarted Superman. And I mention that because Dark Knight came out in 80. Did that come out in 85, 86? I do not remember now. But
I think it was 87.
Really? That late?
I think so.
I'm surprised. Okay, I'm pretty sure that's wrong, but
let's find out.
Okay, because I know the originals came out
originally published in 4 issues in magazine form in 86 and 87. So
there
it
you
would
go.
have been
Okay, 86, yeah.
Over the change of years.
I knew it was 80. I knew I saw the ads in 86 and they were coming out.
The trade was first published in 88.
Okay. Well, the reason I mention all this is that was
this the first printing?
I don't know.
I think I have a first printing. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So 86 is when they
Sorry.
redid Superman. They relaunched Superman, even though the Crisis was, half a year old by the time that they actually restarted it. They published some old, the post-Crisis universe, but they haven't relaunched anything. That continued for a little bit, where he's mourning Kara and Supergirl, and then halfway through the summer, all of a sudden, Kara's never existed. It started all over again, and so that started all over again. But they did reintroduce him as the first superhero of the modern era, and then Wonder Woman, they restarted in 87 based on the success of this and of Dark Knight, which came out in 86, early 87. In that case, they introduced Wonder Woman as like, she's never been to man's world until 1987. So she's saying, hi, I'm a brand new person, which is weird because she's not
stupid.
Yeah, because she should be one of the big 3, and she's not one of the big 3 when nobody knows who she is.
In all fairness, if they're having to reboot stuff, I'm sure they wanted to get around that awful history back in the 60s when they took away her powers.
Actually, no. That was so far ancient history, nobody remembers.
Right. That's not what we're talking about. I mean that they just, unlike with Superman, where they relaunched him, but then they had to jump to modern times with issue 1 of the actual Superman comic, and that's taking place now. And he's got some past where he's interacted with the Justice League and all that, but they kind of, anyway, the point is they didn't take him out of the timeline. They took Wonder Woman out of the timeline and introduced her as of 1987, with DCU having existed all this time without a Wonder Woman.
Yeah, in the introduction of Superman, they did the Man of Steel miniseries, which retold Superman's origins,
right?
And then the monthlies, which became weeklies, because of how they laid it out, those introduces the story for the new Superman,
right?
And
in the case of Batman,
Hmm.
they did not have any kind of relaunch. They just, over time, they kind of, first they had Dark Knight came out. Dark Knight is set in a future which is also the 80s because it's got David Letterman and Ronald Reagan, and the communists and everything. It's the future, but it's also the 80s. It's kind of weird, it's just an Elseworlds. It's not meant to be the future. But a lot of people are like, oh, this has got to happen now. And it's like, it's a sad future for everybody. That's not what we want to happen. But then that was it's an imaginary tale. It doesn't affect the DCU. But then they said, this was amazingly popular. Let's have him do year one for Batman. And so we're sort of setting a new origin for Batman. Not really, but sort of. And they changed Robin. They changed Jason Todd. They just all of a sudden introduced a new story where he's brought in again, even though he's existed for most of the decade. But instead of being a happy redheaded kid that Dick Grayson knew, whose parents were killed and he gets adopted, now he's some scallywag orphan who nobody likes because of the new personality they gave him, and that led to him being killed off.
I never knew that.
Well, and in fairness too, like what they did is they had Batman Year One, and they had some of the stories, and they had the Invasion series. And Invasion, wasn't it Invasion, or was it? Oh no, it wasn't. It was one of the other events. It was the one where they had the Glorious Godfrey.
Legends.
Legends
where
they introduced Wonder Woman. They bring Wonder Woman in as her, and they relaunch her through the big event.
Yeah,
and that's part
and
of the
Suicide Squad. And Suicide Squad and Justice League. They all spawned out of that. Yeah.
And Checkmate. Yeah. So anyway, but when they did, it was just after Invasion. I think it was just after Legends when they brought Max Allan Collins in to redo Jason Todd. And he did and this is the guy at this time. I mean, he was Max Allan Collins, if you guys don't know. Well, he did Road to Perdition. Everybody should know his that work. But he was also the guy who was handpicked by Chester Gould to take over Dick Tracy for King Syndicate. So he was writing Dick Tracy. He was a top-rated selling mystery writer. And so they're like, well, who else do we want to have in here? But we got these big names, and that had been after John Ostrander had been a screenwriter, and he'd come over to write comic books. And so they're like, hey, well, let's see some of our big connections that we made making Superman movie and pitching Batman around to get some of this A-list talent in here to write comics.
Mm-hmm.
My first exposure to Jason Todd was in those, and I didn't get them right off the shelf. I picked them up, actually bought them at Walmart. But that too, Collins did like 3 issues, at least 3 issues of Batman where they introduced Jason. The one where he stole his tires, which I hadn't read. But then the next 2 after that, and where they go back and there's a whole mystery involving the orphanage that Jason is in, and Jason becomes Robin in this 3-issue arc. And issues 2 and 3 were in a shrink wrapped package at my local Walmart, and with a cardboard package, a slider in between the comics, and in the slider was trading cards, and I had Booster Gold and Elongated Man trading card that were I cut out of the port. I still got them.
Wait, you've got an Elongated Man trading card?
Oh yeah, I
want it. I want it.
No, you can't have it. Hang on, I'll be right back. Entertain the folks. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, I can tell you a little more about Jason Todd. That the Jason Todd that was pre-revamp, a lot of you would know because that's the one who appears in Alan Moore's For the Man Who Has Everything, the Superman annual from 1984, I believe. And that's Jason Todd is the one who actually captures the critter at the end and drops it on Mongol. And that is the good Jason Todd, the happy, cheerful one. That a little bit later, after they revamped Superman, then they have like the first meeting of Superman and Batman again, which is weird because it's hard to believe that they hadn't met in all the intervening years. But Superman in his book, he comes across a a scrapbook that he doesn't know where it came from. It's actually his mom's, but he doesn't know it. And he says, Batman, can you figure out where this came from? And in the meantime, he meets Robin, who is freaking out at meeting Superman for the first time. And this is pre-revamp Jason Todd, but post-revamp Superman. So this is the weird little era of 85 to 92 where they were relaunching things like all of a sudden they announced that Hawkman is introduced as a modern character, the same as they did with Wonder Woman. And both of those changes wrecked a lot of DC history by, trying to introduce a character now, but they're so crucial to things that happened before. Like, you've got a Wonder Girl who precedes Wonder Woman and things like that. Yeah, you do. It just doesn't make any sense now. And there's you would think that Hawkman would not be so important, but then you start coming up with all the things he was pivotal for and all the, you've taken him out of all the Justice League stories, and it turns out he's the one who had the teleporter. That they don't have a teleporter for their satellite if it's not Thanagarian. It's just things like that. There's a lot of stuff that they revamp, and then timelines were just a mess. And the 90s was a time where everybody was talking about what is the continuity, because they've half redone it, but not restarted everything from scratch, which is really what they should do. If they're trying to, if you're going to do that, do the whole line starting over from scratch, but they don't do that. So they never do that. Even when they did it again, with the new 52, they left Batman and Green Lantern running. And it's like, that's just odd,
And the Batman situation in that was that his history was still sort of kind of intact after the crisis.
Yeah. But it's now compressed into 5 years.
Yeah, well, after the crisis, there was definitely some of that. But man, where did
I meant for the new 52.
Oh yeah,
he has 4 Robins in 5 years.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I can't even justify that.
Age of reboot.
Yeah. And Dick Grayson, is brought on as a kid, and now he's 25, and that happened in 5 years' time. It's just, it doesn't work. If you're gonna,
I got the impression he was still like 18 in the new 52.
I don't know. I don't know. I didn't honestly. I left. I hated it all, and I left.
Flying Saucer says, out of my timeline, last time I regularly purchased comics was 83.
Wow.
Well, then so you got the good. You got the good Jason Todd then. So here is in that little 3-pack. Here was that of comics. I got this Captain Atom card.
Okay.
And it's got. I'd never heard of Captain Atom. Right. This is like 11-year-old Reese picking this up at the Walmart. Right. Mm-hmm. And here's a little background of the thing inside of it. On the back of it, just printed on cardboard. And there's that character. And let's see. The other one is. Oh, I thought it was right here. It must be further. I used those ones to fill in on my sleeves because they were weird sized. But I thought they were closer than that.
Oh, while you're looking for it, let me just explain that the reason I've brought all this up, all the timeline weirdness and how they have Donna Troy still exists, but they restarted Wonder Woman after Donna Troy exists and all this sort of stuff. There you go. Hey, that's exactly what I have here. It's pretty much. Oh, his arm is a little different. Okay.
Yep.
But yeah,
it's got that little background. So this is the first time I'd heard of Elongated Man, and I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. What's his story?
Wow. And that's his new costume. Okay. Well, the reason I mention all this is because what we're going to talk about, Batman Year One, does the exact same thing. It introduces Commissioner Gordon as Captain Gordon, and he's a young guy, a young cop just leaving Chicago and moving to Gotham, and he's got a baby who's a boy. And so what happens to Batgirl? They didn't really think about that when they redid this storyline.
Well, he keeps talking about Barbara. We just never see her.
Right. Well, and then we find out that's the name of his wife.
That's what's going on? I thought
that's what his name. His wife's name is Barbara. And then it's like, how can he possibly have a girl who's, 15 to 18 to whatever, to become Batgirl if, 10 years go by, and it doesn't make any sense. So then they had to change it so that she was his niece who he adopted after her dad died, and her parents died, and he adopted her. So she's technically not his biological daughter, just to explain, that this all fits. And, it doesn't work. It's like nobody's ever liked that explanation. And finally, I think at some point,
explain something for me, because
I
had to take my car into the shop today. I did not get to finish it. I'm still reading the last chapter right now. Are you saying that happens in this, or are you saying that was a result of this existing?
I'm not giving, as a result of that coming out, and unlike Dark Knight, this is actually this is canon. This is considered canon. They're like, but now that canon negates Batgirl existing, and which isn't that big a problem at the time, because Batgirl was, she's just kind of, everybody's kind of tired of her. Bat Family was years ago, and she hasn't really done much at all. She's almost retired. And then they did Killing Joke, which actually made her more of a character than she had been in a while. And
that was even before before Killing Joke, even they were officially retired her in the
Batgirl special. Yeah,
it was like 6 months before that.
Right. They wanted to give her one last hurrah, and basically in that she kind of realizes she's not really needed, and so she retires. And then they, a few years go by, she becomes Oracle, and etc. But it's kind of like, well, we can kind of lose Batgirl because she was all of a sudden just introduced. Commissioner Gordon never had a daughter until the moment that they introduced his daughter to become Batgirl in that issue. And at that time, Commissioner Gordon's like a very old guy, and kind of like the TV show that they were introducing. They introduced them to it at the same time because the TV show wanted to have a Batgirl, so they did it in the comics. And Commissioner's an old guy on the show. He's an old guy in the comics at the time, and now you've got a guy who's pretty much commensurate with Batman's age. Like Commissioner Gordon and Batman are about the same age, kind of like they are in the Nolan movies, that they're about the same age.
Right.
Yeah. But it doesn't really work if you want to have a guy who's got an almost 20-year-old girl to become a associate of Batman. That's the only thing that I really have to talk about before we get into this, is that, this did create, this created havoc, even though it is very beloved by a lot of people.
I mean, just listening to you try to explain it, I'm imagining that whole, doing math in your head meme.
Yeah. So, Flying Sausage is sad that fans could edit better than DC at the time. Yeah, I think there's some of that, but also people were trying to look at different marketing, right? The idea was it was supposed to be a breakaway, and so you had some people that wanted the breakaway, and some people that didn't. And so Denny had come back in, and he really wanted to kind of pick up where they left off with Bronze Age Batman, and kind of do this street level Batman thing where Batman was an urban legend and nobody knew different and all that kind of stuff. And so that's one of the aspects that is with that. And so that's part of it. But then you also had people like Superman. Like Superman had a lot of weird stuff, like the tiny men that would fly out of his fingers and super kisses and stuff. They wanted to do the more grounded sci-fi kind of stuff with it, which ended up being really soap opera-y too. But and I don't necessarily even think that's bad. I think Superman kind of lends himself to that in some ways.
Right.
But because of that, one of the things that was so weird is Superman was the first hero in the modern age, right? That was what they played with. But because Superman was coming out every month, right? The way that Superman offices were doing is like the modern age starts now. And so they were trying to tell the stories that were happening in Superman's year one all at once. So then when they were crossing over with Batman, well, Batman had already been Batman for like 10 years, right? But you're supposed to just kind of ignore that he'd been Batman for, probably 5 years.
I'm sorry. I don't think that's right. I don't think that what you're saying is right. Batman and Superman debut in the same year, even when they came up with the 0 hour timeline. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. But the timelines are different. Like time is flowing differently book to book.
Yeah.
Right. So Superman's is happening in quote unquote real time, right? But Batman's is happening with this weight of history behind it. But they're both, so when Batman is meeting Superman, right? They're meeting, with a certain amount of history behind them, but the weight of that history is somewhat different, even though it's implied to be happening at the appropriate time for them in their individual books.
Right.
So that's what I'm talking about. So yeah, that's the kind of thing is so it's not a matter that like the DC timeline is different. It's the flow of time within the books are different.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Justice League of America 250, which is a comic where I don't know if you read Justice League at the time, they moved back to their mountain headquarters. The Detroit League got evicted and they moved into the mountain headquarters, and they find an alien potato, and the alien potato drains all their life energies, and Sue Dibney arrives to find that everybody is mummified, and she runs for the button just as she's zapped as well, and she sends out a signal that calls all the Justice League. And all the characters that we know as the Justice League are not active members anymore. This was just before John Byrne. This had to be like 86, but just before the Man of Steel came out. And the reason I mention that is that Superman has a moment where he's like, where did Batman go? I may not like him, but I didn't think he would leave. And I'm like, what do you mean you may not like him? You're best friends. But I didn't know that they were setting up what the new status quo was going to be after John Byrne redoes Superman. They actually wanted this story to make sense in that. Oddly enough, they would then later go back and say neither Superman or Batman were ever in the Justice League. They kept trying to say that for the next 15 years, which just doesn't work,
Are they
but
getting
anyway,
the Justice League mixed up with the Justice League of America?
Well, it was all the same back then.
It was the Justice League of America.
Or whatever. No, there was another one, though. What was it called? Am I getting the name wrong?
This is still
Society?
Yes, sorry.
Oh.
No.
Well, Justice Society was, integrated into our history because they're now part of one world instead of being Earth 2. Yeah.
Which, once again, for the show, for those long-term listeners, know that Hutch and I disagree about this. I think it was a good move. And if I remember right, Hutch, you somewhat think that may have been a bad idea.
Well, it's weird that, Superman is not the first superhero then. There's all these people who've had powers and a lot of them have been flying back in the 40s. And then Superman flies and people are going, wow, a man can fly. Aside from all the men that we saw flying 50 years ago,
Yeah.
So, that's that's going to be one of the problems of, I think that Superman should launch the Age of Superheroes, and having a 1940, it helps if you kind of have a mystery men thing, or maybe they were never seen on film, or but for the most part, if you kind of establish that, back in the 40s, you really couldn't ever get them on camera. No, supposedly they could fly, but we never saw it, type of thing. That might work, but the JSA was kind of always up front with, out in the open.
Yes.
So
yeah.
But
I like this. I like the sweep of history so much. Like the idea that like Jay Garrick is out there doing the Flash thing, and he then retires and has a quiet life, and then this kid Barry shows up doing the thing, and then Jay comes out of retirement and meets this guy, and it has that whole thing. I find that story, that idea, that legacy so charming and endearing that I like it more than I like the idea of Superman. So I like it more than the idea of the Superman that starts off the era of heroes.
Mm-hmm.
I understand historically that doesn't necessarily, but it's just, I like it better.
Yes.
and the way that writers from Mark Waid to James Robinson, who even Peter David have been able to play in this ballpark of legacy and history.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to call it Mitchnerian because I know Mitchner did that with his novels, but I've not read any of them, so I would be just posing. But
the problem with integrating it is that now they still have it that these characters are just have aged all this time, and it's like it's almost 100 years since World War II, and
Right.
yeah, they needed to introduce something where the JSA goes up against a villain, and there's a time warp, and they emerge 30 years ago every time. That's what they need to do. It's always a floating 30 years ago. They reemerge, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's what happened to because it's like they're integrating them into the history where Jay Garrick is on the same world, but it's at a point where we really should not have them. That shouldn't be possible. Yeah. I mean, they introduced
30 years ago when I started reading comics, it made perfect sense.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was 20 years. Point, when Jay Garrick first appeared, it was like 10 years since the last time he'd been seen or something like that. And,
well, what's really interesting to me has always been that, we have this very specific detail that the movie the Waynes were watching that night was The Mask of Zorro. And of course, by the 90s, like you can't say that, right? But then now in 2025, if we go back about 30 years ago, they can be watching The Mask of Zorro.
Yeah. Martin Campbell's Mask of Zorro. Yeah.
The Tony Banderas one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and even then, I mean, you have in big cities, a lot of times you'll have retro theaters.
Yeah.
Go these kind of things.
I actually think they need to do that. I think they need to have a thing that the Waynes were going out to support local theater, trying to help. It's like they were having a revival, and they're like, "Hey,
I want to see them watching the Antonio Banderas film." Well, just for that reference.
Yeah. The other side of it too is that's why, like in Batman Begins, which I have to point out, I had forgotten because I read this comic for the first time 25, 30 years ago. Actually, almost more than that. Actually, almost probably, it doesn't matter. But and then I saw Batman Begins, and I had forgotten how much from Batman Begins adapts this comic.
I was thinking that too. Reading this just today.
It was one of the things like I had forgotten about it entirely.
And not just Begins, but anyway, really the whole trilogy.
Yeah. In some ways, yeah.
Catwoman
and yes. But so one of the things about this though is that when Batman Begins, they don't have Zorro, right? He's going to the opera. He's going to see Der Fledermaus.
Right.
Which is other than having bats, is first of all that's not something I'd take a child to go see.
Yeah.
Right.
He should be leaving because he's bored, not because he's scared.
Well, it's a little boring, but it's also naughty. It's like saucy. Like one of the main plots of the story are multiple couples committing adultery with each other.
He probably couldn't folloh that at 8 or whatever.
It is in German, so
yeah. The but I've been dealing with the fact that a lot of these things of his origin, it's like you've got to now you've rigged it to the point that Thomas Wayne has to be a multi-billionaire at the time, and yet he's going to a theater instead of having a theater in his house. He's still going out to a theater and then walking down an alley with his wife and his kid. You've got to somehow figure out a way for that to make sense, and then
if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. We've hit that point where we need to go back to the 1930s and do a period piece.
Yeah. Because also if you remember, the Batmobile figures into both versions of Jason Todd's origin. Mm-hmm. In the original, Jason Todd climbs into the trunk of the Batmobile and then climbs out, and he's in the Batcave and goes, "Wow, Bruce Wayne must be Batman." And then he gets, or I forget how it happens. He's actually he's in the Wayne Manor, finds the Batcave, sneaks into the trunk, and then gets out, and he emerges in a costume and fights Killer Croc. And it's like having an unlocked trunk that he's able to get out of, and Batman doesn't know what's in it. It's just, it made sense at the time. And then later when they redid it, they have the new scallywag Jason Todd take the tires off the Batmobile.
Right.
And both of those seem highly hard to believe now that we have these smart cars. Even in '89, they introduced the shielded remote control Batmobile. It was a big step up from, this is
Right.
just Batman's sports car, which is what it was in the comics up till then.
Yeah.
And so now it's like it's hard to believe that either of those origins work for
Right.
Jason Todd. and so you've got the origin of Batman doesn't really make sense. The origin of Robin, Dick Grayson is, we don't have circuses. Not
Well,
really.
I was
We've
thinking
got,
about the other day the fact that I don't know. I think Robin was supposed to be like 13 when he was introduced in the comics.
Yeah.
But that has the question. It's like, okay, how long has he been actually doing this? I remember in an episode of Young Justice, he's 13 at the time, but he tells somebody at one point, "I've been doing this since I was 9." Right? Now that means Batman has been training him to fight crime since he was 9. But that also means when his parents were killed when he was 9, he was already a professional acrobat in a circus. How old was he when he started learning to do trapeze?
Well, I think that makes sense if you're a circus family, if you're part of an old-timey circus where you're raising this kid from birth. You're throwing them back and forth to each other and teaching them how to tuck and roll as a 5-year-old. And, this is going to be the same way I was taught when I was a kid, because you're descendants. We don't have that kind of thing nowadays. And in fact, it would be illegal to bring your kid out into the circus. I was thinking you could make this work as like a Cirque du Soleil type thing, but it's like they would not have rules that you can bring out your kid and have him do a drop, even with a net. They wouldn't let you do that to a 9-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old. They won't let you. So trying to make it work in some way is really hard. Trying to update it, it's like, you're right, it really does kind of need to be set in the 1930s and 1940s because
and like I said, I mean, like, all this stuff was not too hard to believe in the 80s and 90s when I was first getting into this. So but there something happened after I grew up where the world got really weird and didn't like child acrobats anymore. It's exploitative.
Right.
What's ironic is that Barbara Gordon does still work because gymnasts are getting younger and younger all the time. Right? It's like this cap. You cannot be a gymnast if you're over like 15 years old.
That's true. The Olympics, you could believe that Dick Grayson has been, doing acrobatics since he was very young because maybe they want him to be in the Olympics as a teen, and he'd have been training all that time. So, but doing it professionally is where it becomes doubtful. But I can believe that the parents would raise him doing, to be very well fit and very well trained, at least in the basics of gymnastics. And then the reason I've thought all this through is that I actually a couple of years ago, several years ago, a decade ago, when, anything pitched to Netflix was being greenlighted, I was thinking that they should really make a Boy Wonder series, not Batman series, Boy Wonder series. That's just, starting with Robin and his story. And it's almost from his perspective. And I was thinking, and then I started toying with, well, how would I make this work? How would I make that work? So that's why I thought these things through so much. Well, they have done a Robin Year One, but I'm just saying as a TV show, it's like we all just want to have a Batman TV show, and they won't do it. It's like, just give us a Batman TV show, and they're like, here's Gotham Knights. It's a bunch of punk kids. And it's like, no. Give us Batman. Just do a Batman TV show. And they're like, how about Batwoman? It's like, no. Just give us why can't you do this? Why can't you give us a Batman TV show, serious, live action?
And that's one of the things they did. They tried that with Gotham, which is another thing.
Yeah.
But even that is still the origin story instead of
Gotham is very much Batman Year One.
It has aside a lot of
moving Bullock back to the first season.
It's
and
Gordon Year One.
Montoya.
What it is.
But what's that?
It's Gordon Year One.
Yeah,
it is. It's Gordon Year One. But then they have him becoming Batman within a couple of years of this happening. It happened. The death of the Waynes happens in the first episode.
Yeah.
And then within a couple of years, the kid is ready to become Batman. It's like,
I hadn't.
Did he ever actually become him, or was he just running around in black leather punching?
They were just they're really pushing it. It's like he should be in mourning and still be planning to become part of the FBI, which is, the official story for a long time was that Batman planned to be a
the
cop or
version
something
in
like that.
which the old story in which Batman went around the world, learning every skill imaginable before he ever came back and started to do this. The new story of Batman generally has him go into a rage and, like in the Batman Begins, for instance, immediately find himself being trained by what are they called?
That's
the
not supposed to be
assassins.
immediate.
Right.
It's in Batman Begins. It's still supposed to be like 7 years.
Yeah. It's like he left at 18 and came back at 25. And yeah, he still had years where he was stewing, and I think that still works with the idea that he was like, I want to become a cop, and then he finds out, cops show up afterwards and collect the information about what was stolen and who was killed, but they don't stop this thing and he's like, I don't want to do this, and then he tries FBI, and they're like, this is not going to work for me, and then it was in the 80s that they actually launched that whole idea of him. I mean, they always had a part where he was out traveling the world, but it was more in the 80s when they had this thing where he just kind of leaves and nobody knows where he is, and he kind of disappears off the face of the earth. That's a lot of this is from year one. Yeah.
Where this comic comes in is like he's just gotten back, right?
Yeah. Although they didn't think he was dead, but yeah, they thought it's like, he's returning to America and wondering what he's going to do.
Right. And one of the things is after I had read Batman Year One, side note, personal story, man. There it is. Look out, oh Mike. I found this thing at my local store.
Yay!
Yeah. Which this right here, this is it was a 3-part miniseries. It was reprinted in digest format, which is how I got it at the local library sale.
I have that one too. That was my
Legend of Batman. And this is such a great story. But this tells the origin. It basically does the same thing that Year One did.
Yeah.
It tells how Batman, except it's framed as a whodunit. But it explains how Batman got his skills, how he got all of his stuff, all that kind of stuff. And in this one, he also went all around the world learning the skills to be Batman.
Right.
So this was a pre-crisis.
Yeah, I mean, he's always had a time where he went out learning from senseis outside of America. I mean, that's always been, well, I can't say always, but I mean, he's had martial arts training from the masters of the world. That's been since the 60s, 70s. I don't know when, but Denny O'Neil was kind of pretty much, always doing that in his stories. So Batman's got a long history of having traveled the world and learned from the best and all that.
Now, this was Len Wein, Jim Aparo, and John Byrne.
And John Byrne, yeah.
Yeah. Now,
I remember looking at that, and Batman's ears were so tall and pointy in that, and it was like compared to what he usually looked like in the 70s. I was like, that's a little shocking. Yeah.
So that's the thing. But this was really great book. If you get out there, check it out. Not what we're here to talk about today, though.
But the Batman Year One, I think what is most influential from that, because it became part of Mask of the Phantasm, it became part of the what's it called, Batman Begins, the whole thing where Batman. Actually, I'm not sure it is totally in Batman Begins, but it kind of is, that he wants to go out and fight crime and he doesn't immediately say, I'm going to dress up as a bat. He just decides, I'm going to just get my gear and I'll go out and I'll put a mask on and I'll go out and fight guys, and nobody's afraid of him. And he comes back stabbed and bleeding and has this real crisis. And then the bat comes through the window instead of sadly, he doesn't have the line, the criminals are a cowardly, superstitious lot, which I love that. It has to be part of the origin. But he's like, what do I do? And the bat slams into the window, and he's like, I need to inspire fear. I will become a bat. And that became part of the Mask of the Phantasm, a great scene. It's pretty much adapted from this.
Now, one of the side notes I got to say here, I have not. I the screen caps I grabbed for this are off of the 4-issue floppies. This is the
Okay.
first. This is the first time getting ready for this that I've seen the color difference.
Oh,
So here I'm going to make myself the big screen.
sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Nope,
I
wrong
may
button.
not have noticed it because I grew up on the floppies. So
Right. So
Whoa,
here's the
okay.
from the trade, and like I said, I also discovered this was appears to be a first printing trade. They're brown, very muted colors.
even more muted. Yeah. The
Right.
the series was considered. I mean, the art style was a jarring difference from the Batman comics of the time.
Right.
The Mazzucchelli art was very
Even-
different.
Even
and,
this, it's all even
yeah.
this here. All these red flares, they're all very muted.
mhm.
Then look at this.
But even so, that's the trade paperback is even more so. Yeah.
Yeah. And here you got Gordon with bright red hair. You've got you've got this, and this is a neat little device. And Miller. Now here's something I want to talk about. I want us as we get going. We can't. Oh man, it's already 8:30. I don't know how we're going to get through this.
Well,
We are not going to
this
be
is
able to
not
talk much of the
computer.
plot stuff. I think.
Yeah.
But one of the things one of the things I want to keep in our minds as we discuss this is something you said backstage a couple weeks ago, is that Hutch, you said that Miller does a really good job of pretending he's making Batman comics, if I remember.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which I want to delve into that. But before we get into this, one of the things that Miller does so great in this book, and I really feel that he is exceptional. I've gone back over it, and so many of my opinions of comics I read in my late teens and early 20s, I've really soured as I've gotten older. Reading back through this comic, I don't dislike it. Right? There isn't anything about it that I'm like, nah, that ain't it, Jack. Right? There are a few elements in here that I question, but as a piece as a whole, I still really like it. But one of the things specifically is Miller's captures the voices of the characters in a way that is almost unheard of in modern comics. There are people that do it, but he'll have 2 and sometimes 3 characters whose internal monologue he's capturing in a way that it feels like they're different people talking. So Jim Gordon and Bruce Wayne, they have different voices. They're written out differently. They're using a script font for Bruce's thoughts so that they definitely look different. But there are no thought balloons in this thing, right? And one of the things that Twitless and I have talked about ad length and ad nauseum on the show is like, whatever happened to the thought balloons? Well, guys, Frank Miller's part of the fault for that.
Right.
the way that he directed the this book and others that put together, they got rid of thought balloons and conveys these captions. But
but they're pretty much his thoughts.
Yeah.
And then they go to Bruce's thoughts, but they're not in bubble form. Yeah.
Right. They're not in bubble form. They're in they're in this narrative. But the narrative, as he gets in there, I just think it's really, really fun and great. And how he sets up this thing. The other thing is the framing in this segment. So as Bruce and Gordon are both coming into town at the same time, Bruce is coming in. Well, Gordon's coming in on the train, and he's saying how the train isn't safe and how it's packed and noisy and dangerous and smells bad. And there's no way when I'm bringing my wife to town that I'm going to bring her on the train. I'm going to shell out for the plane ride so she can stay above the crap, right? And Bruce says the city looks beautiful from up high. You can't even see how grimy it is. I should have come on the train.
Yeah.
Right? So you immediately see that this is going to be the story of these 2 men and their different opinions about the city and how it shapes, right?
Right.
Which I thought was I still think it's a great framing, right? But I have some real problems with the way Gordon is portrayed in this book. And I think that the problems I have with where Gordon is portrayed are exactly why Gotham sucked as a TV show. Right?
Yeah.
And I want to get your thoughts on it, Hutch. Because you were reading Batman before and after this. I came on after this, but in a different way. But before I get into that, Cartoonicus, what is before Hutch and I go deep into this particular nerd well, I want your take on it, because correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time you've read year one, yes?
Yes and no. I don't know what, probably about 10 years ago or so, I did see the animated version, so I knew roughly what to expect.
Okay.
And I remember back at the time when we were talking about the animated movie that a lot of, because they did that for this and for Dark Knight, they adapted both of Frank Miller's works, and the problem is a lot of it, the dialogue when spoken is kind of weird. It's like people don't talk like that. It works on the page, but then you actually get people talking this way when you're putting those words in their mouths, and it just seems kind of off. It's just not the way they should be written for an animated movie. But you want it to be so much like, Frank Miller's work. You don't want to be too non-Frank Miller. So I get the problem, but it is a jarring problem. It doesn't really work as an animated work. And it took so long to make those two.
Well, yeah. And there's,
Yeah.
I've not seen them. I've had the chance to, and it's not something that I want to jump into. So, overall, Cartoonicus, what are your feelings about Batman Year One as a piece, as an artifact of comic book history?
Well, I, unlike you, actually am never a fan of the massive amount of narration, whether it's in somebody's head or not. It gets very jarring to have to slog along with that. And Miller is one of the best of them. When I say best, I mean worst. So that's not fun. I will admit that I did not know until you said something that this was a Miller piece. So clearly he has not reached the extremities that we tend to know him for, of just droning on with like pointless nonsense or constantly going back to some kind of repetition, some kind of repetition.
Mhm.
Right? You know how he does. I hate that so much.
Well, I think part of that. I mean, I feel like you're specifically talking about, or at least in spirit, or hitting on Miller in Holy Terror, right?
That's a lot of his stuff. Holy Terror is one of the most egregious examples. It's true.
Well, I mean, for that, I would think, but I mean, once again, in Holy Terror, the whole piece is supposed to be cathartic, and so that's
like I said, we will have to talk about All-Star Batman and Robin.
Yeah,
probably the worst thing he's ever done.
Yeah, that will definitely be on the list just because I haven't read it, and I hated All-Star Superman because it's a trash fire. Grant Morrison should not be allowed anywhere near places that have things that have keys in them.
See,
somehow we always end up talking about Morrison.
Sorry.
Here's the thing. Morrison is to Superman what Frank Miller is to Batman.
These are Morrison not to everything.
I'm just hear me out.
Okay.
They are not the regular writers of the book. And I think I talked about this several weeks ago when we were talking about, or maybe months ago, that, when John Byrne and Marv Wolfman redid Superman, they brought his power level way down. Now, they disagreed about where his power level should be because Superman, according to John Byrne, can pick up the heaviest ship on Earth and carry it without a problem. And Marv Wolfman wants to do a thing where the Concorde is coming in and Superman can't stop it. He is almost unable to lift a plane, and they want to have, Marv Wolfman just wanted to be even more vulnerable, where he goes up against some villains who are like hitting him with electricity and really knocking him out with electric shocks. And it's like, but I get that because they are each trying to they're each trying to bring him way down from the point where nothing can harm him. He can slough off he can dive into the sun and go, this is fine. That. And the problem is,
if you're going to do that, it does make sense, at least for Batman, to have this be his early days when he doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Superman here. I'm sorry, but Superman. See, the thing is, then Grant Morrison, after they've been doing this with Superman for a while, then Grant Morrison gets a hold of Superman, and suddenly he's just doing weightlifting with a device that is imitating the entire weight of the planet. And he's able to carry the moon on a chain or tow a whole bunch of planets. It's like other writers who are not the regular writers of the book, not just not just Frank Miller, not just Grant Morrison do this. They up the power level considerably. That's when you get into the Bat God who just is able to do everything. And we were talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably why you were saying I was talking about that several weeks ago. It was related to this. The problem that Frank Miller is not the writer of Batman. And he's got an interesting take on it. He's certainly welcome to, do a story, but then everybody's like, Frank Miller is the Batman writer. And it's like, no, he's not. He does this and that, and then he's gone from Batman. But the problem is when they go to make a Batman movie, they hand him Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One and say, there you go, there's Batman.
Right.
And they never hand over the works of the people who actually make Batman on a weekly basis. And
no, I think that's a very valid. I think that's a really very very valid and well observed phenomenon.
Yeah.
But right, my counter to that is I do not see, at least in this, considering it's a year one story, it's a very beginning story, we don't get the character fleshed out.
Right.
I fail to see how year one, now Dark Knight is different, right? Because Dark Knight is supposed to be an old Batman, so there's lots of things that are not kosher Batman in Dark Knight.
Right.
Right? It's a piece of it's complete. Well, of course, it's all imaginative fiction.
Right. I mean, well, it's a future story.
Even in the context of what we're telling there, like if Batman's written out of character in Dark Knight, and he is, that's forgivable because of what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not supposed to be future canon.
Right.
It's just a fantasy story about what would, here's a
well, and even if it was, Batman. It's still future, right? It's essentially an Elseworld at that point.
Right. It's what they used to call imaginary stories before imaginary stories, Elseworlds were a thing. But with year one, I still feel that by and large, there is that Miller captures an epitome of Batman, right? So, like, I would not say that Frank Miller is the final word in Batman, but I do feel like year one forms the beginning of a canon, right? Or has a place within a canon of what makes Batman Batman. Now, I don't feel that his portrayal of Gordon does, and I want to get to that in a little bit.
Oh, that's interesting.
But in terms of how Miller is writing, if you do to year one what Twitless insists I do with Kingdom Come, and separate it from the context outside of the book itself, I think within the book itself, I think it's a masterwork, right? But even when you accept the external context of year one, I feel like the way Batman is portrayed is fundamental and true to the Batmanness of the character. I think there's a canonicity to it.
Yeah.
And part of my argument for why I believe that is that the sources that have adapted the Batman aspects of year one have been very solid.
Yeah.
Right? Specifically Mask of the Phantasm, Batman Begins, right? And to a certain extent, what was good about Gotham was also good in year one. And what was bad about Gotham was also bad in year one.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if we can try to nail down what those things are then.
Yeah.
So my thought is that I meant to send this away to Ask Chuck Dixon beforehand, before I put it out on the stream, but I didn't get a chance to write the email today, so I'll have to do it later because I'm interested to take his take on it. As somebody who's written Gordon a lot,
yeah,
I feel while they did a great job of making Gordon really compelling, I don't think that the moral failure of Jim Gordon in year one was justified or helpful to the overall narrative.
Right. You mean his having an affair?
is having an affair.
Essen.
Yep. His whole thing. It's so meaningless within the context of this story.
Yeah.
It's,
and his
it's,
doing
it's
it when
cheap,
he has a new baby at home.
Cheap drama. Now,
yeah.
lots there's a long history of men with new babies and stressful jobs having affairs.
Yeah.
Totally believable that would happen to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of postpartum women are not looking to have sex, and so you're kind of in a lean time, as well as whatever else is going on in your life. Yeah,
and the baby takes up a lot of emotional energy.
Yep.
And moms just need to sleep after they push out a kid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there are lots of reasons that happens to guys and that happens to wives. That's not the part I don't buy. The part I have a hard time with is that Essen is not a character before the affair. She's in like one panel doing something interesting. Right? Their relationship, it takes up so little space that if you cut out the panels, you would not be missing any of the comic.
Okay, and see, this right here is the part, if anything, looking back, that I can totally believe that Miller wrote. Right? Miller sees... If Miller's going to have a female character, they are good for one thing and one thing only.
Oh, I disagree with that. Because like Catwoman gets a lot more space. In fact, her rising from sex work out of that to be the thief, and her like desiring to shape her own way and to get credit for being her own self. I think it frames that. Now Miller has that the sexuality of women is an intrinsic theme in his works, but I don't think that it is the sole definer of any of. I mean, like even the Barbara, Jim's wife is she's an intrinsically sexual being, and her motherhood, the sexuality of her motherhood, and not in a coital sexual, but in a gendered sexual way, is an intrinsic aspect of the character as she's portrayed, even if she's mostly scenery. But that's an aspect of it. But I don't think it's. I wouldn't say that it's that she's. I wouldn't think that she's limited by that, even if that's a factor in it.
Yeah, I did not like Selina being a old hooker in Dark Knight Returns, which came first. I really didn't like that. It's like, okay, that's kind of a sad end. I mean, she is a thief. She can't do that forever. She's getting older. But it's kind of a sad end to her.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, she was a hooker when she started too, according to Frank Miller. And it's like, that's just who she has always been. And I do not like that at all.
Yeah. And I don't like.
I'll be honest.
It is a possible source for her. Like, you can explain it, but I would prefer that was not her backstory.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about that. I think
that's fair. I would, as far as that goes, in Dark Knight, it is unforgivable because Selina is far too, once having money, she is far too intelligent to ever not have money again. Right. That's the aspect of it. I can see Selina as a young woman not having thought things through and taking an easy road until she had a better idea.
Yeah.
Doing what you can to survive until you have a better idea.
You could also make it that she is a dominatrix who whips men and isn't necessarily having sex with them.
Well, it's never explicitly explained in this situation. She's clearly in this scene I have on the screen that I left there for far too long. That's clearly.
I'm just saying that is, you can read this as that maybe she is just, it's like the guy's all tied up and just likes being whipped, and maybe she has, she's like, I'll do this, I'll never do that. Maybe she might be one of those people. Yeah.
Yep.
And maybe she's high priced. Like, they pay thousands of dollars to get whipped by her.
Could be.
Well,
let's stop talking about that.
Why isn't she rich? And plus, they have a pimp controlling her. So.
Yeah, true.
Yep. Well, everything's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
No business
overall, I really do not like the idea of Selina starting as trash and especially being an SJW character. Like I'll get behind her fighting for animal rights because she loves cats, but that's
That was
about
always
it. After anything after that, I feel like is Poison Ivy's domain. And
Yeah.
if you take away her greed, right, and her love of diamonds and things, then it doesn't make sense that she'd be this back and forth character who sometimes can totally be on the side of the good guys and then immediately turn around and stab them in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's probably enough about her. I mean,
Yeah.
you left the picture up so long. I needed to address it.
Yeah. We had to address it at some point.
Yeah, as far as Essen and Barbara Gordon, the wife,
Yes.
yeah, you're right. And probably if this was a 6-part instead of 4-part story, that would be a good place to build some stuff of Essen, being there and kind of maybe not even flirting, but just paying attention to Gordon when his wife is not paying attention to him, hearing him out when his wife is not hearing him out. She
Right.
may not even be trying to initiate anything, but just, there's, you build that if you establish that they have a good rapport, and then all of a sudden it turns into something, that could have been, like you say, that could have been a better build up to that.
Well, and part of my thing is I don't feel like the story is benefited by this fall from grace, right?
Yeah.
I mean, does it really even go anywhere?
No.
Oh, it
No,
does. It does.
Well,
It's blackmail, and
yes,
and
but like it's blackmail that doesn't
Mhm.
work because he fesses up to his wife and his wife's willing to forgive him and she stays with him and they have the baby, and then the syndicate loses their pull over Gordon, so they end up kidnapping his kid anyway, and then they have the big scene at the end. So it's like it goes, it threatens to go somewhere, but it doesn't really go somewhere because they still end up with a kidnap plan, which is always a desperate play.
Yeah.
Because from the first issue, what's on the screen? Actually, not on the screen right now. It's from the first issue. Gordon hunts down Flass, who is previously. Gordon's not playing games with the other cops, and so Flass gets some guys together. Flass is his direct superior officer, and he roughs him up. And then they go out. And the other cops all get together. It's a
they don't like him not being on the take.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
This was an interesting thing to me because they're trying to teach him a lesson, right? And instead, they accidentally end up teaching him the wrong lesson. And he gets exactly what he needs to be able to stand up against the system.
Yeah.
And so
it does kind of give you an insight into why this guy might be saying this town needs a vigilante to get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It exactly because he has reached that point. Yeah.
So that's the part, like I said, this part of Jim Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciated this story telling that Jim has been willing to cross the line. He knows the line is there. It comes from his background in the military and his time in Chicago. Why he had to leave Chicago was because he crossed the wrong guy who was in with the political authorities there in Chicago. So nobody would work with him. Nobody would trust him anymore because he turned the wrong guy in. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the whole part of the thing is Jim is too good a cop and too honest and honorable a guy to belong in Chicago. So he goes to Gotham, which is worse. Like, there he can pay money. I mean, there he can make money. He can pay for his wife and his kid. But there's two things. And then the other thing in issue 1, where he's going to take this job, he keeps saying, "I hope my wife isn't pregnant. I hope the tests are wrong." Right? He keeps on this, and like that doesn't seem like Jim Gordon to me. And then he has the whole thing with Essen, which undermines the Jim who's willing to, leave a guy naked on the side of the road to protect his own honor. I can't see that guy hooking up with some random chick at work, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I don't see how Jim's moral failing, right, helps the story at all.
Yeah.
Right.
It would help again if there was more pages. It would really help if he and Essen had a one-time thing and he is rewriting it, but there's a but there's a picture of just that one time that he caved, you know. And
Yep.
how did they know to get a picture of it?
Yep.
That's the weird thing.
Yep.
You know, it's almost, did Essen set him up, except that later Essen became his wife in the real comics. But you know, he goes to I like that he goes to his wife and confesses, and I love the part where she gets on the phone and says, yes, I know about this, stop calling. It's just, she has the strength that came through, at least in that scene. I like that, you know.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the, and so that's part of the thing. But like I said, there are ways of making the story making that story make sense. Well, I still don't see how it benefits the greater opus of Batman.
And that's what I mean, though. It's like, this is another moment where Miller, it's like you can just feel him going, you know what we gotta have in this story is some kind of affair.
Yeah,
right.
It would be good just with. It would be good without it. It would be good.
It is very much Miller playing in that Raymond Chandler sandbox.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's one of the things that Miller's really did with his pieces. He took that Raymond Chandler sensibility and applied it to Batman. Personally, I feel like the sensibility makes a lot of sense, but I don't think all of the noir elements belong in a Batman story. And particularly, I think this one was a mistake.
Yeah.
Right.
But noir does have as one of its main things characters who are, you know, who have their own, they each have their own sins, and there really aren't, you know, what would you call there really aren't like upbeat, positive, cheery, good do-gooder guys. There are people with various degrees of, you know,
well, and yet
failure.
The irony here with all that is that if you wanted a steamy love story, you have Batman and Catwoman here. And on top of that, look what they've done with her origin story.
Well, and the other thing about that, that I specifically think is somewhat strange too, is that if you had a situation where, say that it wasn't a full-on affair, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that you know, that kiss under the awning, it started something, somebody snaps a photo, and then Jim's like, I'm sorry, I've been wrong to you. This isn't right. I can't, you know, I led you on, and I've you know, been, and so he walks away from it. They still got everything the same, and it's not like they've taken time out of their life to go have, you know, sex in the office after everyone else leaves,
right?
Which is the thing. And then you have that ridiculous misplaced guilt aspect, and it still becomes this driving a motivation for everything.
Yeah. But I like a Jim Gordon who's a family man, you know, and that's kind of, in a way he always was, or at least since the 60s he's always been, because he was always the father to Barbara. And I don't know what the status was of his wife for all that time. Was his wife dead, or was his wife the mother of Barbara? Was that woman in the comics at all, or was she dead? So. I don't know, but you know, he's always been a family man, and now you have this character. So he's had a Barbara and his, you know, his kid Junior, and then they had to go disappear because they aren't part of the story now. So and what happened to them has been like inconsistent. Sometimes it's they died in a car crash. I think they've done something really bad with them in recent years in the bad Batman comics. They brought him back as a villain or something.
Yeah.
It's
so they have
know.
Well, I'll tell you, because I actually looked into it a while back ago. Jim Jr. Has come back, and he'd been spent like his childhood like away from his dad, and he had like, you know, on some instance back in the day where he might have hurt somebody, but it turns out that he actually killed him, and he'd been a serial killer this whole time, and he was all jacked up because he never paid attention to his dad. His dad never paid attention to him because he was too busy being a cop. And who knows, maybe he even damaged his brain when Batman saved him from drowning, you know, way back in issue 4. So, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Yeah. Sorry, Katrina.
Spoiler alert for a 35-year-old comic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's part of that whole deal. And once again, I don't see like, and I understand that noir always has like these these morally broken people. But we've already seen Jim, being the stand-up cop, beat a guy nearly to death and leave him naked on the side of the road. Right? That's in any other city than Gotham, that would be compromised already.
Yeah.
Right. And so the idea that you need to extend this beyond that, I just don't feel that it's helpful. Right. You do have this, and then but here's the side of it, right? This scene that I brought up here, it's the top of issue 4. Jim has just given Essen this stupid gold bracelet, and she's like, no, take it. And he's like, no, keep it, because you're going to leave and I'm going to be sad. And we have to acknowledge this moment in time that we had. Right. Mm-hmm. Which is stupid. But it's beautifully written. That's the part I want to get at. Right.
Yeah.
For doing what it's doing it perfectly. But what it's doing is stupid. And this comes back to one of the things I was talking about, like Gotham, right? The TV series Gotham.
Yeah.
When we first meet it, you got whatever the guy's name is, Ben, whatever it is, who plays Gordon, right? Yeah. In the first season, the beginning of the first season, it's amazing. And he gets this, this new guy in Gotham City. He's one of the cops who stumbles on and investigates the death of Wayne's parents. He's got this wife back home, and they have a somewhat strained relationship because because Jim won't talk about his problems, but he's taken all this stuff emotionally home with him. And through the course of the first part of the season, you see them kind of develop together and kind of find a rhythm, and it's really great, right? And then she's kidnapped by some villain and driven crazy, and she's a throwaway character who's used as an emotional, like, harp string anytime they need Jim's life to get bad, and it's just so dumb. And I specifically believe that is like that because this is like this.
Yeah, I mean I believe they have Essen in there as well, don't they? And she's like, I think she's black and his superior or something like that. I'm trying to remember now. I think she's a completely different character. But she's there.
There's no infidelity in that directly.
Yeah,
in that relationship,
but I think they also brought in Leslie Tompkins, but she is the hot prostitute from Firefly.
Right. Monica.
Yeah. Yes. There you go. Yeah. She's not the old lady who, is from the Batman comics. She's she's young and hot, and actually, and it's actually the new love affair of Jim Gordon, and then for a season at least, and then and of course the sad thing is that they had Montoya come out of the closet in the DC comics, and now that's all she is. That's all she is a lesbian. It's like, and I thought she was so much more interesting. And it was in the comics they made her so much only a lesbian that they had to try to do something with the character to rehabilitate her. Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that like that this is not a reflection on real people who feel that way. Right. But in fiction, when a character's when a character's personality and everything is defined by their sexuality, they no longer are effective as characters within stories. Yeah. Right. In the same way that Essen in this book doesn't mean very much because all she is a pawn in the game they're playing on Jim Gordon. That's all she exists for in this story. The same is true when they decide to make a character lesbian in the comics. Yeah. So often that's the situation. Right. But what they did with Renee Montoya is they said, okay, well, instead of now, because she doesn't have any impact in the stories because her character is only I'm a lesbian, we're going to go ahead and make her the new Question, and that'll make something interesting happen out of it. Yeah. And I have never read anything less interesting for me. Than the stuff that I have read, which hasn't been a ton. The stuff I've read with Renee Montoya as the Question
is like it's the least Renee and the least question stuff I've ever read.
Yeah.
And it's just
They just wanted a way to take the white guy question and turn him into an Hispanic lesbian.
I think
It's
that's
like
part of
she
it. I also
is a
think it's
triple threat.
well, I think it's also I think another aspect of that is that they just don't know what to do with the question after Denny was done with it.
Right.
I think that's the situation. And this is nothing against the spirit of Denny O'Neil, but it just wasn't because I liked a lot of the question stories, but
I admit I never read him. But a lot of people tell me that when it was finished, he was kind of done as a character.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. When he was he completed an arc and there was nothing else to do with the character other than let him ride off into the sunset.
Sure.
And that's just what happened with it.
Okay.
And I don't know that could have been avoided if he hadn't done everything he wanted to do with the character, but it seemed very clear that Denny was writing a story with a spiraling arc.
Yeah.
Right. I mean it was meant to end definitively.
But then after that, they made the question really interesting in the cartoons, and they really wanted to have him back as a character. So, yeah.
So
regarding the Gotham series, I did not watch it all the way to the end. As you can tell, I did watch a couple seasons, and it's interesting that it tries to be so gritty, and at the same time, it is so corny when it comes to the villains. You know what I mean? It really is as camp as the 60s show in some ways,
in a lot of ways,
when it comes to being the villains. I have to say one good thing, and this is surprisingly given about an issue that we talk about a lot as comic book fans, when they do racial recasting, like I said about Essen, is now she's a black woman, they do this a lot on the show. But one thing that I thought was cool was who they cast as Professor Strange, because I'm going to draw a blank on his name, the Asian scientist from Jurassic Park. Yeah, that guy. He was perfect. He was Professor Strange, and his being Asian instead of Caucasian is not a factor at all. And that's, I don't care if you're a different race. If you can make it, if you're the best person at making this character, then that's great. And
that was one thing about that show that was so frustrating, was that the actor, the portrayal of Strange was perfect.
Yeah.
Everything Strange did was a little stupid.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's just plot writing. But I'm saying the writing, but but his characterization was terrific. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the opposite of when you take Jimmy Olsen and make him a 6'2" statuesque black guy.
Yeah.
It's like that. He is in no way the Jimmy Olsen from the comics,
Well, and yet I remember how ironic it was when I realized that Lawrence Fishburne looked more like Perry White than any white actor I've ever seen.
That's true. Yeah, it was spot on.
That was a great portrayal too.
Yeah.
That was a great portrayal too.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the only good thing about that movie.
I could,
maybe it's possible.
Maybe not the only thing, but I agree. That was good. That was good casting. If you're gonna racially recast somebody, Perry White's a good one to do it with. And Jimmy Olsen, I was gonna say in the new cartoon that they have done, the most recent cartoon, they have Jimmy Olsen as a black kid, but they typify him in the exact way that, I mean, he is still the same way that Jimmy Olsen acts. Mm-hmm. And at least that's better. I'd prefer that. I would prefer, though, that he was a redhead with freckles and a bow tie.
Oh, man, the bow tie is just such an old thing, though.
Oh, it is. I know. I'm just saying. Yeah. But they... they can make it, maybe not the bow tie, but I'm saying,
something,
yeah. They sometimes give them a green vest instead of the green jacket. They kind of keep it in the same. They change. They keep his look the same kind of, but then they get rid of the, the old jacket that no kid would wear that now.
All right. So anyway, before we move on, I do want to say, Fly Fox Pro, I am so sorry. I'm gonna bring attention to his comment here, just as we were talking about Selena and the affair and all that stuff. And he says, my son looked at the screen, pointed at the Cartoonicus's little title, a video of an old woman, and said, "Oh, choose that one."
Choose that one?
For kids. You saw the thumbnail with my little picture of Grandma and Kitty.
Oh.
And then this is what we're talking about.
Maybe he's got headphones in.
So he wanted that picture to be full screen instead of what was being shown.
Or I think he thought it was a video like YouTube. I click on that video. Let's watch that one.
Oh, maybe I thought the point was he chose what video he wanted to watch based on that, and then we open up and we're talking about all this stuff.
Oh no, I don't think
I
so.
get it. I get it. Yeah, he thought, click on that one. Play that one. That looks interesting.
Because it does sort of look like just a thumbnail that would play there because of how you've actually got the movement already in there. So.
Yeah.
Isaac said when they were talking about the bracelet, and he re-gifted it to his wife for her birthday. Ooh. Gordon, you piece of crap.
Speaking of what people have done later with Batman Year One, Batman has this scene where he goes and confronts the mafia, and then Kevin Smith called back to that one and said that when he set off the explosion, he peed his pants because Batman peed his pants because he was too close to the explosion or used too much explosive or something like that. And it's like, why? That's why Kevin Smith doesn't write stuff for DC anymore, I think.
Yeah. Also, it's crap.
Yeah.
That's
your
too
one
harsh.
again.
I mean, there were some elements of Quiver that I really, really liked, and I did like the Sounds of Violence story that came after that one. But
I don't really get the onomatopoeia character. I know what onomatopoeia is as a concept, but I don't really get what the villain does, or it doesn't work for me. And I've even seen him adapted, and it still doesn't really work. But anyway. Hutch was saying maybe. Okay.
Yes, that is in fact what Hutch said.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, the channel's the NSFW. That's what I put on there, just in case. I'm sorry, kids.
It's Miller. What else do we expect? Gosh,
yeah. So Batman's flying, but with a glider.
Yeah. Well, and actually, this is interesting here. He says, I think he thought Cartoonicus was a video game. That's actually really interesting because we got to wrap the show up here pretty quick. It's getting time. Yeah. But next week we are talking about this little video right there.
Okay.
Is what we're doing next week. It is Kitty's Day Out. Is Cartoonicus's webcomic / game. And throw me the link so everybody who's tuning in can check it out. I'll put it on the screen in the chat.
Okay. BD Wong. BD Wong is his name. Sorry.
Oh yeah, the actor.
BD Wong is the actor. Yeah, I didn't mean to slight him. I thought his performance as Doctor Strange was just wonderful.
Oh,
so
no, it was just...
Doctor Strange. I'm sorry, not that Doctor Strange.
Yeah,
yes.
No, it's great. Strange. It's great. And not it's. I found it so obnoxious because what they did with Arkham was stupid. Everything in that show with that was stupid. His performance was great, right? And but
there's it was really only only one good episode, and it's the one with the Todd with I'm sorry, not Todd. What's her name? With the two acrobats from the circus, and somebody got killed, and then they find out that the that the person who killed this lady was her son, and he starts talking, and suddenly you realize that is going to be the Joker, and it is awesome. And I wish they had done nothing more with the guy, because that would have been just a perfect episode. But then they kept bringing him back, and then they killed him off, and then they made somebody else the Joker, and it's like.
Yeah,
it was. Work,
it was.
That one story, as a, just as a payoff from out of you're looking at, hey, there's Dick Grayson's parents. That's the focus of this episode. That is so cool. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, this guy, yeah. He's giving the Jack Nicholson sneer and looking at the camera, and it's like, oh my god, yeah.
And it's like
it's a good episode.
And part of the thing is I felt like Gotham too, unrelated to year one, but I felt Gotham tried too hard to go into, because it was just like all of the texture and everything, especially in the first season, was like, okay, no capes, no costumes,
right?
We're all before year one, and we need to live in that space and deal with it. But then they kept trying to like be like, this is a Batman thing that people will like, and this is a Batman thing people like, and this is a Batman thing people will like. And
all
it's
the
like,
villains appear. I
tuned into the show to not watch a Batman thing.
Yeah.
So basically, they did what Smallville did, only in a third of the time.
Yeah, that's what bugged me about Smallville is every Superman villain is coming out and see he's not Superman yet.
Right, by the time the show was done, it wasn't Smallville, it was Metropolis.
Yeah. Yeah, that was anyway, I like Batman Year One, but some stuff I wish wasn't canon, and some of it became not canon over time. So
yep.
And yes, Fly Fox, I believe they would.
Oh my gosh! Party at Kitty and Studs.
I don't know what that is.
That
is Sylvester Stallone's first movie when he was a struggling actor and needed to find a movie to pay for his rent.
I guarantee you, it is nothing like the stream you have heard here tonight.
Yes.
Do not seek it out.
It says Cartoonicus is too innocent for this world. Perhaps. But yes. Sorry, it's all mean to you, he says.
By the way, I liked the Hudsucker Proxy reference. Sorry, Cartoonicus, I talked over you. I was just saying I like the Hudsucker Proxy reference up above, but for kids.
Oh, I didn't get that first. Okay.
Well, that's why I was looking for a circle on screen. I was trying to figure out what it was referring to. But anyway, Cartoonicus, I talked over you. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Oh, what was it?
We were talking about. I think you're talking about.
Used to call me Vanilla.
Oh, Vanilla.
I was like, you could have at least made it French Vanilla.
That's hilarious. But yeah, Kitty's Day Out is a family friendly. It is an all ages comic/game that is available on Tapas. The link is there in the chat. We are going to, the commitment for everybody that's going to show up tomorrow is we all have to go through at least some of it once, and then our plan.
Tomorrow?
No, next
week.
Okay. Did I say tomorrow?
You said tomorrow. I'm like, I gotta get booking.
I've never looked at it on the app. I've only used it on the website. So 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 that's it. We don't have to. I'm not saying all of it because it's like a choose your own adventure thing, and it's kind of different. I definitely don't need to expand all of it. We will be playing a little bit on stream next week. Cartoonicus had come to me and he said, "Let's do a Comics Creators Club when we'll look at another family friendly comic and do a comparison." And I said, "No." I said, "Your comic is weird enough. It's different enough. It's its own take on sequential storytelling that we are going to do this for just a show that's just Kitty's Day Out next week." So, and then after that, I don't know. I haven't gotten a hold of anyone else. So we'll hopefully next week we'll know what we're doing the week after. Well, I haven't done a lot of writing, so I'm happy about that.
Pray that Twitless can show up for this one.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Hopefully. So anyway, I know he's got a hard out where he's got to have everything done by this summer. So
I'm quiet.
What happens?
So
nobody commented on my beard.
I did notice, and I wasn't sure if I just hadn't noticed before or if it was brand new.
I got rid of the gray.
Oh, that's the deal.
Yeah.
So
what did you think I grew it in a week?
That was right. I was really just noticing that it was there. Yeah. So in other words, you de-Gordonized.
Yeah. Actually, that is his color, isn't it? There you go.
Okay.
That's it. We
Yeah.
need to get
Well,
you
that's
to
the show,
work.
guys.
Yes.
Tune in next week for Kitty's Day Out. And until next time, get out there and read some comics. Maybe even A Wrinkle in Time. Anyway, later, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Where's that button? Where's the go away thing?